Escorts of Reddit, who was the weirdest client you've ever had? Former male escort. I mostly had great clients, but my worst was a client who was trying to inject drugs into himself in front of me, something I was emphatically not participating in and not comfortable with. He couldn't find a vein and was just bleeding profusely out of his arm. My pants were down around my ankles. He's bleeding. There's a TV show playing which is a series almost Lynchian interviews with aging residents of a dying rural Canadian town. And then his mom walks in. I wish I could say I learned my lesson and never saw him again, but I did. And his mom burst in again. Not me, but a friend of mine is an escort cam girl. Maybe not super weird, but the guy asks her to wear a thong over panties all day, and then send said thong to him. He said he likes the smell, but only wants a hint of pussy smell. She finds it funny that the guy wants to get kinky and weird, but not too kinky and weird. Sorry to hop on this, but the not too kinky part reminds me of this story which I've told before. I used to escort. I'm a guy and did it with other guys, and for a while I had an ad on a site that was a mixture of dating profiles with a few escort profiles. The escort profiles were marked fairly clearly, but a lot of people still didn't get it. One time while traveling in NYC, a guy messaged me to poop on him. I wasn't necessarily against it, I would eventually have to. Anyway, I'd make some cash. And as long as I didn't have to, like, touch it after, fine. So I asked him when he wanted, as I was concerned about being able to perform, and he offered up the immortal "whenever you got a big log for me, bro." So I let him know my pricing, and he's immediately shocked and angry that I'm an escort, which he apparently hadn't noticed. And he says I could never do something like escorting. Even years later, it's still funny to me that he believed his thing was perfectly normal, and that I was the freak in this situation. Not me, but a friend of my ex was a professional, as she called it, just outside Reno. When I knew her, she was pushing 40 and had been out of the business for 10 years, but my favorite story of hers was when she was paid $10,000 to accompany one of her regular guys to his 20 years high school reunion. He bought her a ticket and flew her to Texas. Her job was to basically act as his girlfriend for the reunion, complete with backstory. She said they had once the whole weekend, but that he basically went around to all the people there introducing her to them. He wasn't even a well-off guy. He sold used cars for a living and took out loan to finance the trip, just so he could pass off her as his girlfriend at his 20 years reunion. Oh, and during the reunion, his best friend, because she thought he was cute. So this guy's best childhood friend hooked up with a woman he thought was with his best friend girl. I'd have loved to see that come to light. Kind of a twist answer to the question. My boyfriend's roommate was an escort. She was having a slow day, so she didn't have any out calls. She didn't get contacted all day except by one absolute weirdo, who asked if she could collect her used condoms for the day and leave them in a garbage can in the bathroom so he could take them home. He was willing to pay $50 a condom. My boyfriend and I were both home, didn't have a whole lot to do, wouldn't have minded beer money. She asked if we were willing to take care of the job for her. Needless to say, we made $100 that day. She kept $50. A good friend of mine was into escorting while in uni. Her weirdest, saddest client that she has talked about is when a mother paid for her to date and sexually please her son. This was all in effort to make the son's father see the son as worthy of a man to continue the family business or something. She once had to be on a family dinner with the four of them. I had one ask me to walk on live slugs and snails in my bare feet. He wanted to film it for a video he was making. Apparently it was a common fetish and he sold lots of the videos. I declined and we just had regular. Another had a full-on fetish for being run over. He would talk about it constantly. Had all these stories about how he had met girls and talked them into running over his stomach as he lay naked in the dirt with an erection. He used to show me videos online of similar situations, so it must have been another common fetish. I never had with him. Just masturbated him to orgasm as I talked about running him over. One night as I was leaving work, he came running out asking me to run him over. As I drove off, he stuck his foot under my wheel. The next night he showed up and gave me $20 for the hassle. That's hilarious. He has quite a drive. Friend of mine that was an escort got offered $10K to suck off a guy's dog while he watched. She turned that one down thankfully. I once had a client that wanted me to wear his teenage daughter's clothes. But did you do it? Unfortunately. I wasn't a physical escort, but more of an emotional cam-girl escort. I had 4 consistent customers I had over a span of 2-ish years that would vent to me, talk about their day and life. It was honestly kind of like having friends. But friends that would want to see me semi-naked sometimes. I wouldn't call this weird honestly, but I had a very sweet consistent customer who was a closeted trans girl. She didn't have much confidence in her body, but the kicker was that she was about my skin tone and our hair was fairly similar. Mine was just a little shorter. She would buy pieces of lingerie and outfits for me to wear and send them to my P.O. box along with a PayPal payment ranging from $100 minus $250. I would model pieces for her over Skype, then we would talk about her hormone therapy and self-confidence, etc. After a while I felt bad for taking her money because despite modeling underwear, she never really asked for anything inherently sexual. Fast forward about 2 years ago, I checked up on her and turns out her family accepted her and she was fairly pass able. She seemed very happy about herself and I'd like to think that I had some hand in that. I wouldn't call myself an escort, but there have been a few photos with compensation if you get my deal. One guy wanted pictures of my feet, but only on a tile background. It couldn't be carpet, or a bed, or even a rug. No, it had to be white tile. I didn't have white tile in my apartment, so I had to go to a friend's house. It was quite the awkward request. Can I take a picture of my feet at your home? I require a tile background. He ended up compensating me well, but I never asked why he needed a tile background so bad. One of my ex-girlfriends had this guy offer her $800 to kick him in the balls, just once, in public. She declined. I'm not sure why. Not anymore, because it just isn't worth the effort with SESTA. But I once had an adult baby. He wanted to be nursed, talk to like a baby, play with baby toys, bedtime stories, diaper changes unused, thank goodness, or I'd have said no, all the stuff. It was all right. But I don't have a maternal bone in my body, so I really had to work at it. I had a client who wanted to have with him in his kitchen, specifically when he knew his roommate ex would catch him so that he could with his roommate ex-BF by showing he had moved on. The money was actually pretty good, but you could see why they split. Not actually an escort, but I've gone down the sugar road. I had a guy who would pay me to tell him about my day. It was the easiest and weirdest money I ever made. Reverse psychiatrist. Less weird and more sad. But I did a house call to one guy who was most likely 450 plus pounds. Stunk to high heaven, but he was very nice, paid well, and had 3 adorable doggos. I also had one deaf guy, a very, very not suave dude who drove a green Kia Soul and did what a lot of deaf people do, as in with the exaggerated lip movements and spitting. Kissed like he had only ever seen a 3-year-old trying to copy French kissing, making big smoochy lips and pressing them all over with copious amounts of slobber. That one was gross. Not an escort but a stripper. I have so many weirdo stories. I once made a guy agree to drink a cup of my piss because he was being an. Another paid me $100 to fart on him. One guy brought in a literal engagement ring for me, like literally thought we were actually gonna get married in the club with all my stripper friends as bridesmaids. Plenty of feet guys. Couple of armpit guys. You name it. It stops becoming weird after a while. Besides, I kinda find weird behaviors endearing, to be honest. On the posher side of the pond here, my friend is an escort and she's let slip about some weird ones. Client turned up midsummer around 300 pounds and in dirty clothing. Apparently the stench was so awful, and it was after 30 minutes of him driving around trying to find the place with her shouting instructions on the phone. Another one was apparently into sploshing. She said it was fun, but she had to stop since the cleanup was a pain. Client apparently decided to pull out, whip the condom off and on the sleeping cat in the room. For us simpletons. What is this sploshing you speak of? I looked it up and it seems to be a wet and messy fetish. They like copious amounts of a wet or messy substance on the skin. It can be anything from cake to more adventurous stuff. Well, I'm not an escort, but I did do some light sugar babying for a month or two to pay for textbooks. One guy wanted me to pretend to be his daughter, like his biological daughter, and he literally called me daughter. No thanks. Bye. I knew someone back in the 90s who did phone. She said her weirdest client was a guy who wanted to be put in an oven and cooked. She had to describe the whole thing to him and he totally got off on it. It takes all kinds, I guess. Not an escort but used to be a stripper. Weirdest client I ever had was a man that came in asking girls repeatedly to dance with his grandmother's stockings on. He kept asking the wrong girls. Half were like, so long as he pays money, and the other half called him Norman, freaked out, and ran away. Unfortunately for him, he kept asking the second group of girls over and over again. No, I didn't do it, but I was willing to walk on him in my stilettos, which was another fetish of his. Paid me $300 to do it for like 10 minutes. I knocked out when he asked me to stand on his neck.